What is it that makes an anime a classic? What separates the shows that we talk about to this day, like Death Note and Full Metal Alchemist, from the flavors of the season that we forget about as soon as they're over? Like, I can't think of anything, but that's kind of the point. Classic anime have more than just quality and mass appeal. They have staying power. They have ideas and imagery that stick with you and make you want to talk about them and share them with your friends for years after they wrap. And if you know what to look for, you can spot these things in anime as they're airing. Spring 2017 has given us at least one great example. Recreators is the most underrated anime of the last few years. That might seem weird of me to say considering how many people like it, but by the time it wraps, I'm willing to bet that many of them and many of you will love it. Right now, it's being written off as yet another pretender to the isekai crown with a clever twist, a wannabe Re:Zero. But I think that marketable premise belies its true brilliance. You don't realize it yet, but Recreators is the second smartest anime of spring 2017, and quite possibly the best show of the year. Now don't get me wrong, Recreators has done fairly well for itself, all things considered. It has a fairly sizable audience that it's maintaining steadily week after week, a decent number of people are participating in episode discussions on Reddit, and my anime list has it ranked as the 7th most watched show of the season, which isn't amazing by most standards, but consider that everything above it on this list is either a sequel, a spin-off, or a spiritual sequel to something insanely popular, or the exact same fucking light novel show that everyone watches every other season forever. Recreators, meanwhile, is a totally original anime series. It's not easy to get original anime off the ground. Manga and light novel adaptations have built-in audiences because they're known entities with existing fan bases. And positive buzz around the source material means that hype will build for the adaptation even among people who aren't already fans. I mean, I haven't read Shield Hero yet, but I'm already stoked to watch the anime when it comes out, and tons of people were excited for One Punch Man before it came out without ever reading that manga. With an original property, you can only stand on the strength of your product and your marketing, and the legacy of your creative team among enthusiasts. That's why we don't often see original anime, why the ratio of adaptations to original shows is something like 20-1. But when we do, it's often good reason to be excited. Because when you look at the greatest anime of all time, a huge number of them, Bebop, Shampoo, Gurren, Madoka, Eva, Lane, are original anime. And they're not just good, they're so iconically good that you can recognize them from just one word in their title without me showing anything from them on screen. This is something I talked about in my Adapt or Die video back last summer. Given a good creative team, original anime have huge potential to become classics. I mean, they can be duds too, hell, the same studio that made Recreators also made Ald Noah Zero, but the potential is there. And if you don't see that potential in Recreators, you are selling the series short. This isn't just a matter of pedigree. I mean, yeah, the series is directed by A. Aoki, who has 2 legitimately great series under his belt in Horo Musuko and Fate Zero, and it's co-written by Rei motherfucking Hiroe, who earned his middle name by writing and drawing Black motherfucking Lagoon. But 5 episodes in, the show is already standing on its own merits. So far, the show has given us 3 incredible action scenes packed into a plot that's moving at a solid clip while exploring a number of interesting ideas. But what's really elevating Recreators above the rest of the pack is the goddamn brilliant character writing, which shouldn't surprise anyone familiar with Black Lagoon, which is as smart and nuanced as it is funny and gorgeous. And on that note, Hiroe also did the show's character designs, so those are pretty great as well. But maybe you think that that comment on the writing is hyperbole. Maybe you want some hard examples to back up my claim that this show is brilliant. Maybe you're looking at the length of this video and wondering when I'll stop beating around the bush and get to that part, which is obviously what's coming next. Well, fine, smarty pants, you want to get meta? Let's take a look at how this show is a million times better at that than you or I will ever be. Like many contemporary popular anime, Recreators stars a nerdy kid who accidentally opens up a portal to a fantastic anime-like other world. But a few things set it apart from the rest. Firstly, the other world isn't just anime-like, it is the world of an actual anime within the show. And secondly, instead of staying in that world, he brings a fictional character back with him. And as it turns out, she's not the only character in this situation. Across Japan, characters from manga, video games, and TV shows have been breaking free of their worlds and entering ours. And it seems like they're all hurtling towards a massive battle for the fate of all worlds. Which, man, first off, what a brilliant premise for a fighting game. I bet the lads at Arc System Works are kicking themselves for not coming up with it first. You've basically got the setup of Fate, except instead of a gender-swapped historical fanfic, you can pit copyright-safe parodies of Shinji Ikari, Dio Brando, and literally any pretty cure against each other. And you know what? If this was just a setup for a bunch of cool fight scenes, I'd be on board for that. But Recreators has so much more to offer. First and foremost, it has something to say. A lot of things, actually, about the nature of storytelling and the creative mind, about the metaphysical ramifications of fiction becoming fact, about what it means to meet the god of your world. Some people have complained that it has too much to say, but plenty of classics are laden with dialogue, and Episode 7's crazy fight makes it clear that this show is building to its big set-piece moments by establishing its characters and concepts first, not just killing time with exposition. This is a story about stories, and it seems genuinely interested in exploring, or at least addressing, all of the different facets of that idea. And these ideas inform a lot of great character dynamics. Nami Kirameki is a magical girl who confronts the series heroes, Sota, Celestia, and Meteora, in the second episode, when they refuse to side with her and the military uniform princess who brought them all to the real world. She attacks them almost immediately. She comes at them with a barrage of huge red bubble hearts that create massive explosions wherever they land. But although these things look comical, they're terribly destructive. After she lands a hit on Celestia, Monika stands there, stunned, looking at all of the destruction that she's caused and her bloodied, bruised opponent. Monika is from a children's show where blood just doesn't happen. Bad guys disappear in a puff of smoke, and good guys who are wrong get hit until they change their minds. In her world, violence has no real consequence. So when she comes into ours, she has no sense of restraint and no concept of how badly she can hurt somebody, which is really kind of fucked up if you think about it. It says something about how mollycoddling children with the entertainment that we show them may not really be the best thing for them. And it says that without, saying it. The series trusts you to think about it without laying it all out for you, which makes it a powerful character moment rather than a preachy bit of tacked-on philosophy. And that's just the tip of the iceberg with Monika. She's a really great character precisely because she's not a great character. She comes from a watered-down, pandering kids show with mediocre writing, a show made to market branded products to kids, not fulfill some grand creative ambition on the part of its writer. So she is, by her very nature, much more flat and simple than the other characters around her. And in that light, it totally makes sense for her to be siding with the bad guys. The villains in her world are, in all likelihood, really obvious about it. Cackling megalomaniacs and Rita Repulsa types. So when a villain comes along spouting ideals that sound good on paper, that's really all she needs to be convinced. Coming from a world with no nuance whatsoever, she is very easy to fool. She may have a passion for justice, but without a basis for knowing right from wrong on anything more than a black and white level, that just makes her very, very dangerous. But she seems to be becoming increasingly aware of that danger as the series goes on, growing as she becomes familiar with a world that is much less simple than the one she's used to. In the most recent fight scene, which was amazing, she shows hesitance to use her powers and a willingness to listen to the other side. But she's still got a stubborn, childish simplicity to her mindset. She exhausts herself trying to stop everyone else from fighting because she doesn't grasp that conflict is sometimes inevitable, even between fundamentally good, well-meaning people. Again, this isn't something that the show says to your face. That would be bad writing. Rather, you can infer it from what she says and how she acts. Now, maybe you think I'm reading too deeply into this, that the production team didn't think all of this through to this level. But when you look at how committed this show is to addressing potential plot holes and digging into the philosophical implications of its themes and story, you reach the inescapable conclusion that Aoki and Rei Hiroe are thinking about this kind of thing. I mean, one of the big world-building concepts of the show is the idea that fictional worlds only have as much information as their creators pour into them. Meteora talks about how food in the real world tastes better and more complex than food in hers, because outside of crazy detailed RPGs like Trails in the Sky or games with cooking mechanics, most stories never bother to flesh out the cuisine in their worlds. And this is coming from a show where writers have to defend their artistic integrity to characters who they are causing to suffer by writing their stories. It's a show where these writers discuss their motivations for making a character think or act a certain way, sometimes with those characters in the room. Aoki and Hiroe would need to have a staggering lack of self-awareness to write a story like this without thinking about these details in the process. And you can infer similar details about the rest of the cast. The other villain who's been given the most screen time as of this writing, which is 5 episodes in, is Alistaria February, the protagonist of a fantasy epic who is driven single-mindedly to save her besieged homeland. She comes from a more adult story, but she's a very simple character. No matter how the situation changes, she only ever has one long-term goal: to save her homeland. So long as someone frames their own ambitions as something that will help her achieve that goal, she'll go along with it. That means right now that she is devoted to helping the military uniform princess Saber subjugate the creators. But it's very possible that she could switch sides if she ever becomes aware that her actions are actually going to destroy her world. The same goes for Monika, who already seems to be reconsidering her allegiances and trying to resolve things without conflict. We'll see how well that goes. These characters have very simple motivations, which makes them predictable in their own stories, but allows them to be used in unpredictable ways by more complex characters in the show. And in the real world, with its added complexity, they have a lot of potential to grow compared to the rest of the cast. Which is interesting to think about. It's fun to speculate on what these characters might do, and the depth of the character writing here, even for the simplest of the cast, is what facilitates that discussion. But, of course, having interesting characters with different outlooks on life and motivations that drive their actions is just one aspect of telling a good story. It's what these characters say about the media they come from that elevates them and the narrative of recreators from good to truly great. One of my favorite beats in the story so far is Meteora's meeting with the developer of the game that she's from, A Valken of Reminisce. And man, if nothing else, you've got to give these writers props for how they capture the meaningless absurdity of English JRPG titles. This game must have been made by Tri-Ace. At the company, Meteora discovers that her creator, or at least the guy who wrote the bulk of the game's story, since no video game is ever really the work of just one auteur, died the previous year in an accident. Unlike Celestia, who has had the chance to meet with both her illustrator and her author, Meteora is faced with the truth that she is never going to be able to pick the brain of the person who made her and her world. Now, whether Meteora looks on her creator as a father or a god, it's understandably pretty distressing for her to learn that he's dead. She takes some time to herself while the rest of the protagonist squad tries to figure out what to do next, and ends up marathoning her entire game at a web cafe. And the way that she reacts to this is just fascinating. When she rejoins the group, it's clear that playing her game has given her a powerful emotional revelation. It's played with the same catharsis as a character finding a letter from the dead father they never knew. It's an alien concept to us in the real world, playing a video game in which you are an NPC. But when you watch the scene when Meteora expresses with heartfelt relief that her game was fun, you feel the truth of that emotion. The impact is made stronger when you consider how this contrasts with Celestia's reaction to her creator. Celestia refuses to read her own light novels or watch her anime because she feels like it would be weird. But Meteora is capable of enjoying her game as entertainment. She raves about how much detail was poured into the world building in particular. I think the implication of that is that because her world is so fleshed out, she has a closer point of reference than most of the other creations for enjoying the complexity of art in our reality. Meteora comes from an open-world RPG, and using the Trails series or Bethesda's games as a basis, it's not unusual for games like that to have their own in-universe fiction. So maybe she has an appreciation for stories, art, and entertainment that Celestia simply can't comprehend. She is a librarian, after all. And that's not just speculation, either. Look at their different reactions to this beautiful mural in episode 2. Meteora's reaction is not an isolated moment either. This show is very good at getting you to relate to its characters even when they're at their weirdest. The protagonist, Sato, is a great character in his own right with a lot to him, but I feel like praising him won't get across just how strong this character writing is. He's a young, aspiring artist who enjoys nerdy pastimes and wants to tell his own story despite being plagued by crippling self-doubt. Of course I can relate to him. He's high school me, albeit with a binder full of drawings that he never wants to show anyone, rather than a folder full of terrible half-finished manuscripts that never will see the light of day. But while he is a much more down-to-earth and easily relatable character than some of the fictional ones that he encounters, he's not a blank slate for the audience to project themselves onto. Sato is a character with history, a history that apparently connects him in some deeper way to the military uniform princess, making him more than just a bystander in this plot. What we've seen of that backstory hints at some sort of failed creative ambition, and indicates that the show may end up addressing how characters are affected by their story being left unfinished. Which I'm excited to see. I love it when shows explore all of the different implications of their premises like this. And the concept of recreators has a ton of potential for exploration. How will these characters take meeting cosplayers or the actors who play them? It's kind of a shame that none of them come from a live action series like a Sentai or Kamen Rider. That would be wild. I'm also looking forward to seeing recreators dig into the exact mechanics of how these characters and worlds come into being. It's already been made clear that they're not simply the product of their creator's imagination, otherwise Celestia would have fire magic right now, but are they born out of the collective subconscious of humanity, or are they iterations that exist within the mind of whatever specific viewer sees them enter our world? Each of these explanations could drastically change the nature of the show's plot moving forward. And what of the meta-narrative of the show itself? I mean, it is ostensibly set in the real world, but the reality is that it is itself an anime, with its own creators behind it. What happens if the characters become aware of that? Will they come into the real world? Will the show shift into live action? That could either be incredibly cheesy or subversive and mind-blowing. The show doesn't need to do something like that at all, though. It already works really well just playing its premise straight. But it could, and that's really cool. Even with as much effort as I put into analyzing and second-guessing it, I don't know where this story is going. It's already surprised me a few times. Meteora talking about playing her game, Matsubara's defense of Celestia as her own person to the government committee, and Mamika's shocked reaction to her own violence were unexpected moments of brilliance. And in episode 5, when the JSDF raided Nakanogane's house, I was expecting a big fight and a shift into a dumb, cliched us versus the world plotline to force the creations into hiding. But instead, after the initial burst of action, the characters were brought to a cabinet meeting where they worked out a temporary solution to their problems with a group of calm, level-headed politicians. Yeah, the government in this show isn't evil, or incompetent, or even well-meaning, but horribly misguided. They're a bunch of consummate professionals doing their best to solve a totally unprecedented crisis with policy and special legal measures. They were working on a way to contact the heroes quietly, and they would have done so if a new one hadn't appeared in a giant fucking robot and forced their hand. This is so much more realistic and interesting than the government simply fighting the fictional characters because they're weird and strange, or having the perfect solution to every problem that comes up and only ever having that ruined by individual corruption, like what we see in Gate, which is so fucking bad. Oh my god. Realistic stories about how governments function and sometimes don't in times of crisis are fascinating to me, and I wish that we had more of them in anime and media in general. The way that Shin Godzilla tackled these ideas left me craving more, and while there are flashes of that in Guillermo del Toro's The Strain, the rest of the show is way too dumb to really satisfy my craving for this stuff. Now, I don't think that Recreators is necessarily going to focus super heavily on this plotline because it is already doing a lot with its metafictional premise and huge cast of characters. But I like that these details were included and not breezed over. It adds a lot of believability to the show's world, which is important, especially in an isekai series which needs to create a strong delineation between fantasy and reality in order to work properly. Fortunately for me, there's another original anime this season that is built around digging into the politics of world-changing events, Kato the Right Answer. You know how I said Recreators is the second smartest anime of spring 2017? Kato comes in first. Right now, I'm not going to explain why that is because I highly recommend going into Kato cold. Episode 0 is a wild ride that's gonna leave you wanting more of what it gives you, only to change things up and give you something even cooler that you didn't even know you wanted. Kinda like School Live, but not at all like School Live. Just trust me on this one, guys, it's real good. I've already got a video in the works talking about it. But I'm getting distracted from the subject of this video. Recreators is also real good. Real good. It has an intriguing plot and a brilliant premise, and it strikes a great balance between strong character moments along with little beats that make its cast more relatable, like the girl talk on the subway in episode 5 contrasted with the guy talk, and big, impressive action scenes. And the music! I haven't even touched on that, but you've been hearing it. It's Hiroyuki Sawano, and I really don't need to say anything more than that. His OSTs are almost always the best part of any show he works on, and Recreators features some of his best compositions to date. I haven't really touched on the direction and shot composition either, but Aoki is doing a great job on that front, as he always does, and I'm confident that I will be talking about it in a future video. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that Recreators doesn't just have all the makings of a classic, it is already well on its way to being one. And there have been enough moments of brilliance in these first 5 episodes that it's not just speculation based on the pedigree of the creators. Of course, starting strong doesn't mean that a show will finish strong. Many of the people on this team, including the director and composer, proved that very thoroughly with Aldnoah Zero. But the foundation for this story is already a million times stronger than Troika's shitty Gundam knockoff, and they keep building it up with each successive episode. Rei Hiroe is clearly a lot more involved in the development of this story than Gen Urobuchi was in All Noah, and I'd argue that he's a better writer to boot. While it's possible for this show to fall off a cliff, at this point I would be surprised if it does. It could also just turn out to be a decent action series if these ideas fizzle, but I've got high hopes that it will continue to impress. And while, yeah, there's gonna be egg on my face if this turns out to be a flop, I'd be even more disappointed if the series turned out to be as good as I think it will, and anime fans just ignored it, or dismissed it as just another isekai story with a mildly clever twist. That's why I'm making this video right now. I want to give people a basis to fully appreciate the things that this series is doing right while it's still running. I want to use the small amount of influence that this YouTube channel gives me to steer the conversation around it in a positive direction. I also want to be able to say I told you so when the show is widely regarded as a masterpiece, but you know, that doesn't make me look as cool. If Recreators isn't on your radar already, then it should be. If you've written it off, then you should consider reevaluating your stance. And if you're a fan like me who just wants this show to get the recognition that it deserves, then you should consider sharing this video with your friends, your family, your Twitter followers, or the 12-year-olds yelling at you in Overwatch, you know, whatever your biggest social circle happens to be. And if you're a fan of the show, then you might also enjoy Rei Hiroe's other series, Black Lagoon. And if that's the case, then I'm sad to say that you missed out on some good shit in this month's Loot Anime Crate, which you could have signed up for at a discount at lootcrate.com/basement. In line with their theme for the month of humanity, Loot Crate sent me a kick-ass Black Lagoon ammo box for storing random knickknacks, and speaking of knickknacks, it came holding 4 very nice aluminum coasters featuring the show's main cast. The crate also included Volume 1 of one of my favorite horror manga, School Live, as well as a nice little Attack on Titan notepad set and a chibi figure of Best Boy Captain Levi. Like I said, it's good shit, well worth the $27 a month that it costs to subscribe. And the good news is, they send you good shit like this every month. So if you act fast, you don't have to miss out on their upcoming Unnatural Crate, which contains goodies from Noragami, Death Note, Parasite, and One Punch Man's cooler older brother, Mob Psycho 100. The even better news is that you can get 10% off a subscription to Loot Anime or any of their other fantastic crates by signing up at lootcrate.com/basement and entering the promo code BASEMENT at checkout. You'll be helping out the channel a lot if you do, and giving yourself a nice little surprise in your mailbox every month. On that note, you can also get nice surprises in your subscription box every week by subscribing to Mother's Basement and ringing that notification bell if you haven't already to make sure that you don't miss anything that I send your way. Or if you want to go that step further, you can support me on Patreon, which will give you access to the VIP channels on my Discord server, special anime hangout nights, a database of my video scripts, blooper videos, and other cool stuff. I'll put a link to both that and Loot Crate in the doobly-doo. Now, if you're itching to see even more of me right now, then I recommend checking out this video where I talk about what goes into making a great adaptation. Or this one where I run down the best anime openings of 2016. Anime openings are kind of my thing, if you didn't know. But if this is the last I see of you today, then I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.